Alright, so finally, welcome to week 3 of Spiritual Basic Training here on YouTube. Took me a couple of extra weeks. It even tried again today. My water softener keeps flooding the basement. I finally figured out what was wrong with it today. So I wasn't sure I was going to get it out today, but I will. So, week 3, disconnecting from others' influence. Now that we're going to get into significant detail. I'll do a detailed video on Patreon tomorrow, and I'm sure Karen and I will have a very detailed video out probably Monday that we film on Sunday about that. But I just wanted to come on, do the YouTube edition, and give you 3 things that are going to be some basics that'll help you get started before you get to the Patreon edition if you're watching that. But also, if you're just following along on YouTube, it's very helpful as well. So, the 3 things. The first thing is, when you're disconnecting from somebody else's influence. What do I mean by that, right? So, the bottom line here is that you know you better than anybody else, period. End of discussion, okay? There will be some who can see things in you that maybe you don't really see, but you know you more than you, even if you have it wrong about you. And let me explain what I mean. You know the experiences that you've had. You know the lessons that you've learned. There's things you've told other people, and there are things that you haven't told other people. And there's things that you've shared about how you view yourself, and then there's things that you don't share. Okay? But the most important part to it is that when it comes to lessons, okay, we're all here to learn our own individual lessons. It becomes part of a relationship, especially for one person to want to stop the other person from learning the lessons, from having difficult things and hard things happen to them. It's like, maybe you don't want to do that because this bad thing might happen. Well, if you're somebody like me, I learn through the bad things happening. That's how I learn. If nothing is going on, I will make something happen, and I don't care what the result is for the most part, just so I have something to do, something to react to. Otherwise, I get bored real easily with life in general. So, when you're disconnecting from somebody else's influence, the first thing that you're going to have to do is you're going to have to recognize you may not always make the perfect decision, okay? But it's your decision. And that's the difference. When you're learning, when you're taking advice from somebody else and things don't quite work out the way you wanted it to, now you have them to blame. Okay? But if you're completely, authentic to yourself and you say, you know what, I appreciate the advice, I appreciate the help, and I'm going to do things the way I want to do them. That way, if I screw them up, I only have me to blame. So, like I said, we'll get into that more detail tomorrow and especially on Sunday, but that's the first part. The second thing, what do I have over here? This is an activity, okay? I want you to take 3 things that have happened to you in your life, all right? 3 things over the history of your life. And things that have gone, I want you to pick a variety, things that have gone well, things that maybe didn't go so well, and then things that turned out like dog shit. Okay, let's just put it. All right, so I want you to look at those 3 things, and I want you to go back and recognize and evaluate the differences in how you came to make the decisions. Was it completely listening to yourself? Was it listening to your gut? Was it listening to your head? Was it listening to your spouse? Was it listening to a parent member? Was it a family, parent? Was it listening to your kid? Was it listening to your dog? Okay, they've never steered me wrong, so I'm just going to put that one over to the side. But the point is to go back and find examples of this went really well, and this is who I listened to, why I listened to them, and the technique I used to get my answers. And the stuff that maybe kind of worked out okay, but could have done it, maybe could have, would have, should have been better. Look at it that way, and then look at the things that have just completely gone batshit crazy, and I wish I would have done something differently, especially those. Where'd you get the idea? Who'd you listen to? Where did where did you get your final answers from? These are questions that are going to, we're going to dive into a little bit more tomorrow on Patreon, but I just want you to kind of get those things in your mind. Now, for those of you who are not following along on Patreon, the most important questions, the most important thing to lay out is, in the times that I have completely listened to myself, what have been the results? But extrapolate that out a little bit more, okay? So this is a time that I took nobody's advice and I demanded I'm going to listen to myself. I'm going to do this thing. And then you look at it and you say, okay, so what happened? All right, good or bad, what happened? But then keep extrapolating out. Okay, what was the result of that? And what was the result of that? Go with 2 and 3 and 4 events down the road from the initial thing to see if you can find a pattern where I've been listening to myself and it's not working out perfectly, but then eventually I get to where I want to go. And maybe we can, later on in the course we'll teach you how to, take that process and kind of shorten it a little bit, or at least make it so that you're not driving yourself crazy. If you just recognize that your process, that may be your process, and you just recognize, all right, it's going to not look so good, and then boom, it's going to work out great. So get those 3 things in your head, definitely, and just start, playing around with how you got the answers, how you made the decisions, and, if there's a pattern there with listening to somebody in your life and it doesn't go so well, you're going to need to check in with that and make sure, and maybe start thinking about disconnecting from their influence. Now, the third thing that I'm going to talk about here, okay, is doing it without, this is for relationships, okay, specifically. Especially if you've been in a relationship for quite some time and the dynamic has already been set, the boundaries have already been set. You can't just walk in the door one day and be like, that's it, I am not listening to anything else you had to say, I'm doing it all on my own. This is going to be a short relationship, okay? It's just not going to work out well. All right? You can do it without making an announcement, at least without making an announcement to the people that you're no longer going to be listening to. All right? So the technique that I would use in that event is allow them to continue to give you the advice that you would normally allow, and tell them, oh, I'm going to think about it, I'm going to consider that, and then do your own thing. Okay? Now, you have to start watching their reactions. Okay? If they're giving you the advice that they normally would, and you've decided you're no longer going to listen to it, and you don't want to just come to them and say, I ain't listening to you anymore, so go away. You don't want to do that. It's not going to be beneficial to anybody. So you let them give you the advice. Then you start doing your own thing anyway. And 2 things. You start seeing the results of doing your own thing, and you start seeing their reaction to you doing your own thing, but in the context of how it's going to work out. So there's a lot of different play there. There's a lot of different scenarios, because it could be working out for you, and they'll be saying, well, maybe they'll say, oh, okay, it worked out for you. Either way, I just want you to be happy. Or it could work out for you, and that person might still be like, yeah, but if you would have done it my way, it still would have been better, or it still would have worked out. So you kind of have to watch that. And then, as you get on and you start having experiences where you're taking your own advice and it's working out well, and that's been going on for some time, more than a couple of weeks, that's when you start making some decisions on your own, seeking out their advice, and just sort of let it gradually kind of change in the dynamic of the relationship. You don't want to just, we all get motivated to change certain things and be certain ways, right? But you don't want to just come home to somebody who has been helping you get through things, or at least to them, they think they're helping you. Maybe you're doing the work and you're realizing their advice is not really working out so well, I need to make a change. That's fine. Don't just come home and be like, you suck, I'm not listening to you anymore. We've got to do better. Okay? If you want, unless you just want the relationship, then if you're trying to sabotage it, I guess that's one way to do it. But I would give it, more than a couple of weeks. I would give it to where you've allowed the dynamic, 4, 5, 6 times of letting them give you the advice, but not taking it, and just playing around with it, seeing, okay, how does that change what happens? How does that change your reaction to what happens? How does that change their reaction? And then you have to kind of, you kind of have to gauge it. If they're still going to get butthurt that you're not listening to them, even though things are working out for you, that might be a sign that the relationship is not going to function in the way that you want it to. And then that's when you might need to sit down and have a talk and be like, look, this got to change. But if it just kind of naturally goes where they recognize you're starting to make your own decisions, because maybe that's what they want. That's the other thing. The other person might be sitting back privately and going, I wish they would make their own decisions so they wouldn't keep coming to me for advice. They may be thinking that privately. So it may work out to where you start taking your own initiative, it works out, and they're like, hey, great, that's awesome, I'm so happy it worked out for you. But you won't know until you try. So, all right. Those are 3 things that I wanted to talk about here today. Like I said, tomorrow I'm going to be doing the video on Patreon. That's probably going to be a little bit longer, obviously a little bit more detailed. I have a lot more stuff written down here. If you haven't subscribed to Patreon, all the complete 22-week spiritual basic training course is available on Patreon right now. You can sign up until April at the $3 a month level and still get the entire course. After April 1st, I'm going to be changing that because it's not fair to those people who have been paying all along the way. It's not fair for people to just come in at the end and then get it for like 2 months. You see what I'm saying? So if you still want to get the whole course for that price, it's got to be up until April 1st. After that, we're going to change it. We're going to be having some other changes. We're going to be doing a Kajabi platform, I'm pretty sure. So look for that, especially if you're a member of Patreon. There may be a time down the road here in the next couple of months where we're going to be kind of transitioning from one thing to the next, but we'll make that as easy and soon as possible. So other than that, I appreciate everybody's support. Like, share, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you on the Facebook group, Lightwork for Lightworkers as well. I'll see you again in the next video. Tomorrow's daily.